Have you ever had a strange thought and then watched reality respond? Maybe it was a sudden feeling that something was about to go wrong, and within hours, your day began to collapse in ways you couldn't explain. Or perhaps you randomly thought of someone you hadn't spoken to in years, and suddenly, their name appeared on your phone. Most people dismiss these moments as coincidence, a random overlap, a meaningless accident, a trick of the mind. But what if these moments are not accidents? What if your thoughts do not end inside your skull? What if every thought you think sends something outward, an invisible ripple, echoing into the reality around you? And what if the life unfolding around you right now is not simply happening to you, but responding to you? This may sound mystical at first, but the deeper we look into psychology, neuroscience, and the strange mechanics of human perception, the harder it becomes to believe that thought is a closed system, because thought changes biology, thought changes behavior, thought changes outcomes. And in ways so subtle that most people never notice, thought changes reality. The most unsettling part. Most of this process happens unconsciously. In other words, the reality you experience every day may be shaped less by what you consciously choose, and more by the mental signals you are constantly sending without realizing it. Your fears, your expectations, your hidden assumptions, your unresolved emotional patterns, all of these may be quietly organizing the events, choices, and energies that define your life. And if that's true, then chaos is not always random. Sometimes, chaos is an echo of your own inner world. To understand this, imagine standing beside a still lake. The surface is calm, almost like glass. Now imagine dropping a small stone into the water. Instantly, ripples begin to spread outward. The stone was tiny. The movement was brief, but the effect expands far beyond the point of contact. Thought may work the same way. A thought seems small, silent, private, but it may create ripples in your nervous system, in your perception, in your emotional state, and eventually in the reality you inhabit. A fearful thought creates tension in the body. That tension changes your tone of voice. Your tone changes how people react to you. Their reaction changes your next decision. That decision changes the outcome. Suddenly, one small internal signal has altered the external world. This is where many people misunderstand the relationship between mind and reality. They imagine that thought creates reality means thoughts magically rearrange the universe. But the truth may be far more subtle and far more powerful. Your mind influences the lens through which reality is filtered, and that lens influences what becomes real for you. If you expect rejection, your body prepares for rejection. Your posture closes. Your energy contracts. Your sensitivity to negative signals increases. You begin to notice evidence of rejection everywhere, not because reality objectively changed, but because your internal state began selecting and amplifying certain outcomes. This is not fantasy. This is how perception works. The brain is not a passive observer. It is an active interpreter. At every moment, it filters vast amounts of information, deciding what matters and what does not. This means reality, as you experience it, is not raw truth. It is interpreted truth, and the interpreter is shaped by thought. This is why two people can live through the same events and emerge with completely different realities. One sees failure, another sees opportunity, one sees betrayal, another sees revelation. The event is the same, the inner signal changes the meaning, and meaning changes the future. Carl Jung describes something related to this when he explored the idea of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to align to be random. Moments when the external world mirrors something internal, a thought, a fear, a symbol, a pattern. To Jung, these moments hinted that the boundary between inner and outer reality may be more fluid than we assume. And while many interpret synchronicity as mystical, it may also reflect something deeply psychological. When the unconscious mind becomes active, it begins arranging attention, perception, and action around certain patterns. Then reality appears to respond, not because the universe is obeying thoughts like commands, but because the unconscious mind is constantly participating in the creation of experience. This is where chaos enters the picture, because the unconscious mind is not orderly. It contains fear, contradiction, suppressed emotion, trauma, expectation, desire, and inherited beliefs. It is a storm beneath the surface, and when that storm sends signals outward through behavior, perception, and decision-making, it creates effects that feel random. But they are not random. They are patterned chaos. This explains why certain people seem trapped in repeating cycles, the same kind of relationships, the same kind of failures, the same emotional endings, different faces, different places, same pattern. They call it bad luck. But often, what repeats externally reflects what repeats internally. A hidden belief says, "I am not safe," and life keeps generating unsafe scenarios. A hidden belief says, "I will be abandoned," and every relationship begins to orbit abandonment. Not because reality is cursed, but because the unconscious mind keeps sending the same ripple, the same energetic instruction, the same invisible pattern. This is why people sometimes unconsciously recreate pain, because the mind prefers familiarity over freedom. Even painful patterns can feel safer than uncertainty. So the unconscious keeps rebuilding what it already knows. And reality begins to resemble the architecture of the mind. This is what many people call manifestation. But without awareness, manifestation becomes repetition. Instead of creating intentionally, people recreate unconsciously. They call in the same chaos, the same fears, the same endings. Then they wonder why life feels like an endless loop. The answer may be that reality is reflecting what consciousness is broadcasting. And consciousness broadcasts far more than words. It broadcasts expectation, emotion, attention, belief. This is why two people can pursue the same goal with opposite results. One acts from fear, one acts from alignment. The action may look identical, but the signal underneath is different. And that signal shapes behavior in microscopic ways. Tiny hesitations, micro-expressions, energetic tone, risk tolerance, interpretation bias. These invisible differences accumulate into visible outcomes. That is how thought echoes into reality, not instantly, not magically. But continuously. And because the process is constant, it becomes invisible. People notice the event, but not the signal that led to it. They see the chaos, but not the echo. They experience the consequence, but not the pattern. This is why awareness is so powerful. Because the moment you observe the inner signal, you interrupt the automatic pattern. When you notice fear as fear, it stops masquerading as truth. When you see expectation as expectation, it stops defining reality unquestioned. Observation weakens unconscious repetition. This is why becoming the observer changes everything. Because the observer is the point where unconscious chaos becomes conscious choice. The observer notices, "I am expecting disaster. I am replaying an old fear. I am projecting the past onto the present." And in that noticing, a new possibility emerges. The ripple changes, the signal shifts, and reality begins to organize differently. Not because the world outside magically transformed, but because the internal architecture changed. And when internal architecture changes, behavior changes. When behavior changes, outcomes change. When outcomes change, reality feels different. This is the hidden mechanism behind what many call life transformation. It begins with thought, but not surface thought. Not positive affirmations repeated over fear. It begins with unconscious thought becoming visible, because the unconscious is where the strongest signals originate. And until those signals are seen, they continue shaping reality in silence. That silence becomes your environment. That environment becomes your life. So the most important question is not, what do you want? The deeper question is, what are you unconsciously signaling? Because your conscious goals may say one thing, while your unconscious patterns say another. You may consciously want peace, while unconsciously expecting conflict. You may consciously want love, while unconsciously fearing intimacy. You may consciously want abundance, while unconsciously believing scarcity is safer. And the unconscious signal usually wins, because it operates beneath awareness all day, every day. This is how chaos is created, not by intention, but by contradiction, and until contradiction becomes conscious, chaos feels like fate. If unconscious thoughts are shaping your reality, then the next question becomes impossible to ignore. Why don't we notice it happening? Why do these invisible signals remain hidden while their consequences appear so clearly? The answer lies in the strange way the mind protects its own patterns. The unconscious mind is designed for efficiency, not truth. It automates beliefs, automates reactions, automates interpretations. It turns repeated experiences into invisible programs. This is useful for survival. You do not consciously think about every breath, every step, every movement. The unconscious handles it, but it also automates emotional expectations, and once those expectations are automated, they begin operating as reality filters. Imagine wearing tinted glasses for your entire life. After years of wearing them, you stop noticing the tint. You believe the world simply looks that way. The unconscious mind works like that. It places emotional filters over reality. Fear becomes a lens, shame becomes a lens, scarcity becomes a lens, abandonment becomes a lens, and once a lens is in place, reality begins to match it, not objectively, but experientially. This means two people can stand in the same room and experience entirely different emotional worlds. One sees threat, one sees opportunity. One sees judgment, one sees connection. The environment is the same. The internal signal changes the reality. This is why the hidden patterns of the unconscious are so powerful. They do not merely influence how you feel. They determine what you notice, how you interpret, and how you respond. That triad, attention, interpretation, response, creates the architecture of daily life. And because this happens automatically, most people mistake it for just how life is. They say, life is stressful, people always leave, nothing ever works out. But often, these statements describe an unconscious pattern, not universal truth. And when those patterns repeat long enough, they create what feels like destiny. This is why certain emotional states seem to attract matching experiences, not through supernatural force, but through resonance. Fear notices fear. Shame notices shame. Confidence notices opportunity. Your dominant internal state tunes perception like a radio. The frequency determines what becomes clear. Everything else fades into the background. This means your unconscious state is selecting from reality what reinforces itself. A fearful mind sees danger. A hopeful mind sees openings. The world contains both, but the mind amplifies what matches its signal. This is where the echo becomes self-reinforcing. You fear rejection. That fear changes your behavior. Your behavior influences others. Their reaction confirms the fear. The confirmation strengthens the belief. The belief increases the fear. The echo grows louder. Soon, the unconscious signal becomes a closed loop, and life begins to feel like proof. Proof that the fear was true. Proof that the pain was inevitable. Proof that chaos is natural. But the proof is often the result of the very signal creating it. This is the deepest illusion of unconscious reality creation. The mind creates evidence for the beliefs it already holds. And because the evidence feels real, the belief becomes harder to question. This is why awareness feels disruptive. When you become aware of the signal, the loop is interrupted. Suddenly, what felt like fate becomes visible as pattern, and pattern can be changed. This is the beginning of conscious creation, not controlling the universe, but becoming conscious of the signals you send into your own experience. It begins by observing emotional repetition. What emotion appears again and again? What fear keeps returning? What story keeps replaying? Wherever repetition exists, a hidden signal is active, and where a hidden signal is active, reality will begin organizing around it. This is why awareness alone changes outcomes, because awareness alters the signal. The moment you witness a fear consciously, it loses some unconscious control. The moment you name a belief, it becomes separate from identity. Instead of, this is reality, you begin to see, This is a pattern. That distinction changes everything. Because reality feels permanent, patterns are changeable. Once you see the difference, your relationship to chaos transforms. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What signal might be shaping this?" This question restores power. It moves you from victimhood to authorship. Because even if external events are beyond control, your internal signal is not dot. And that signal influences everything. Your energy when entering a room, your tone in a conversation, your willingness to act, your openness to opportunity, your interpretation of setbacks. These shape the pathways your life follows. This means that changing your life does not begin with changing circumstances. It begins with changing the unconscious signal that interprets those circumstances. This is difficult because the unconscious resists change. Its primary goal is familiarity. Even painful patterns can feel safe as they are familiar. This is why people stay in destructive cycles. The unknown feels more threatening than the known. So the mind recreates what it understands even if it hurts. The familiar chaos feels safer than unfamiliar peace. This may be one of the most important truths about the unconscious. It often chooses familiar pain over uncertain freedom. And until this is understood, people sabotage the very change they claim to want. They say they want peace, but unconsciously recreate conflict. They say they want success, but unconsciously fear visibility. They say they want love, but unconsciously avoid vulnerability. Then they conclude that life is against them, but often, the hidden signal is contradicting the conscious desire, and reality mirrors the deeper signal. This is why transformation requires honesty, not surface positivity, not denial, but radical honesty about the emotions beneath the words. What are you expecting? What are you fearing? What feels familiar? Because whatever feels familiar often shapes what feels real, and whatever feels real becomes the stage on which life unfolds. When people begin observing these signals, something remarkable happens. Chaos starts losing its mystery. Patterns become visible. Triggers become understandable. Repeated outcomes become predictable. This is not because life becomes fully controllable. It is because awareness reveals the architecture beneath the chaos. And once architecture is visible, redesign becomes possible. This is the real meaning of conscious creation, of not forcing events, not commanding the universe, but changing the inner blueprints from which perception and action emerge. The blueprint changes, life changes, different choices emerge, different reactions unfold, different opportunities are noticed, and what once felt like random fate begins to reorganize. The echo changes because the source changes. This means the most powerful creative force in your life may not be effort. It may be awareness. Because awareness reaches the source. Effort often works at the surface. Awareness works at the root, and the root determines the pattern. This is why observing your inner state may be more transformative than trying to control outcomes. Because when the source becomes coherent, the echo becomes coherent. When the signal becomes calm, reality feels different. When expectation changes, perception changes. When perception changes, decisions change. When decisions change, life changes. This is the bridge between mind and reality. Not mystical domination. But continuous influence. And this influence happens whether you are aware of it or not. That is why unconscious thought is so powerful. It shapes reality silently, until awareness makes the silent visible. And perhaps this is the real message. Your thoughts may indeed echo through the universe, but first, they echo through your body, through your perception, through your choices, through your life. That is where reality begins responding. So before asking whether the universe hears your thoughts, ask whether you hear them. Because the signals you ignore may be shaping everything. The fears you never question may be writing your future. The expectations you never examine may be guiding your reality. And the chaos you call random may be the echo of a hidden pattern asking to be seen. The moment you become aware of that pattern, the echo begins to change. And when the echo changes, your world changes with it. So maybe the real mystery is not whether your thoughts ripple outward. Maybe the real mystery is how long they have been shaping your life without your awareness. And if that is true, then the greatest power you have is not to control the world. But to witness the signal before it becomes the echo. Because the moment you witness it, you begin to create consciously.